Hey everybody, welcome back to the PPC Masterclass with Bateman Collective. On this episode, we're going to be talking about location and budget strategies. In the previous two, we recorded about why PPC, why it's effective, and we talked about how Google works and effective bidding strategy. So today we're going to be talking about location and budget strategy. So I'm in the Phoenix market.
Yep.
So by default, if I'm going to start a PPC strategies, I'm going to start in Phoenix. Is that the strategy everyone does?
It's not what everybody does. It is what a lot of people do. Let's talk about this because this is one of the biggest things. And I actually find myself talking about this a lot because even for PPC experts, this is a whole different game. Because let's just say you're in like the e-commerce world. You're just like, okay, we'll target the United States.
Anybody and everybody.
Yeah, because if they live in the middle of nowhere or they live in the heart of Los Angeles and they buy my product for $20, guess how much revenue I get? $20.
Yeah.
If this is real estate, now the place where they live is the product.
Mm-hmm.
So their location has a lot to do with my success.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it is like a very commonly debated topic. And the reason I'm so excited for this particular episode is because I think a lot of people will learn things because there's a lot of kind of polarizing views out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's people who like push really heavily for like very wide geographic targeting.
Mm-hmm.
And there's people who push very heavily for narrow geographic targeting. I'm hoping to add some balance to that conversation by talking about like how they're both kind of right and where you can kind of strike that balance and maybe, because that's, to me, that's strategy. Strategy isn't just saying X is better than Y. It's saying like for a situation, X might make sense and maybe in a different situation, Y makes more sense.
I think where a lot of people get into trouble, or not a lot, but a bunch of people get into trouble is when they get dogmatic and they're just unwilling to listen to the other position, right? We're not saying pick one, pick the other. It's just evaluate the pros and cons of backyard, pros and cons of nationwide, pros and cons of being doing both, and then make a decision and let the numbers talk.
100%. Yeah, that's absolutely the best way to do it. So I think the easiest way to show this is like we can kind of share both sides of the argument a little bit. So let's just say I am somebody who kind of promotes a single market real estate model. Usually what I'm going to be saying is that focus is what you need. These people that are across a bunch of markets, they don't know what they're doing. You got to be like, go deep in a market. And why would you ever go somewhere else if there's more deals to be had in the market that you're already in? It just doesn't make sense. And you're going to be better and operate more efficiently as a business that way. Meanwhile, people who are proponents of going into more markets likely are going to be saying, well, with the shifts that are happening in the market, like some markets are really good, some markets are bad. Like if you were just focused in Phoenix during the hike in interest rates, I don't know a single wholesaler in Phoenix that was just like, you know what, that was fine. That was easy.
Yeah, that was pretty traumatic. You just went straight into a really deep wound right here.
Yeah. Versus clients of ours that were like more flexible geographically, some markets were totally fine.
Well, you were in the Midwest. It's like,
yeah,
what are they crying about over there?
Exactly. So diversification is a big one. The other thing is with PPC, your cost per lead goes down as you go into more markets, right? So some proponents of more national type strategies will even say like go really, really wide, like statewide campaigns in many states, and you get this really, really cheap cost per lead. And there's people out there saying like you should never pay more than $70 for a PPC lead, for example, stuff like that, that are focused on like these really heavily national models and a really cost per lead heavy strategy.
Yeah.
But there are benefits. Like let's just say you could pay less for leads and all else remains equal. You're making more money that way. So that's a good thing. So that's kind of some of the benefits of going nationally. Or like Robert Wensley, we talked about before, he'd probably say go national. So you can focus on like the markets that have the highest spreads. So you can be doing the right deals, which is technically like national, but way different from like a Nick Perry model that would be like national, but let's do statewide campaigns in a lot of states to get a really, really low cost per lead. And we end up doing a lot of deals in rural areas. So here's, well, first, any thoughts? Like, have you heard any like arguments outside of what I've shared already?
The arguments against going nationwide is the inefficiencies because you got to find a new title company. You got to have boots on the ground.
Yeah.
Random places, right? Photos, lockbox, And then like I completely took for granted, because I just grew up here, right? Completely took for granted how awesome we have it here in Phoenix. Like I could clear title this afternoon, right? I get a motivated homeowner at 9:00 in the morning. By 3, I can clear title.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying this is the norm, but if I make a big enough stink, right, I call the branch office. It's like, hey, I got a foreclosure tomorrow. I need to clear title today. It happens. We had deals in Oklahoma City that took 3 months to clear title.
Wow.
Right? Because they have, my understanding, they're one of the worst, right? Because they have abstracts, right? And so there's that. And then we had New Mexico where like we had deals. Like we were buying it below, like typically in Phoenix during the good times, you lock it up at 80, you're still doing pretty good. 80%.
Even 90 in like the really good times, right? Like there were times like where it got crazy.
But like in Albuquerque, we were locking them up at 70% minus repairs. Like this is a freaking grand slam. Finding buyers that were willing to go look at properties.
Yeah, they just don't want to get off the couch.
No, we're like, hey, so like we got the property under contract, so we're looking for the first guy. Like, you know, when can you go out? Like, oh, I got an opening next Tuesday. It's like, that's in 5 days, right? In Phoenix, if they ask for 5 hours, you could just like, all right, I'm never calling you again.
Yeah.
So
no, I understand.
The working multiple markets did cause stress, but we also didn't have systems and processes here, right? Like, if I go into a market knowing it takes 3 months to clear title, now I can run a business prepared for a 3-month title search.
Yep. And you'll find experiences all across the board. I think it matters like who you have on your dispo team. Like, because I just interviewed one of our clients that did well, like moving to a national strategy. They moved to national, launched a PPC campaign, and did over 7 figures their first year doing that with pretty great return on investment. And when I asked them, they were just basically like, honestly, a deal, it doesn't matter where it is. Like dispo's the same. Like, I don't get why people get so caught up on this. And then meanwhile, other people have like a hard time. And I think it depends which states you're going into. I think it depends on how you're doing it. A lot of the people associate nationwide with rural because a lot of people who go nationwide get rural leads.
Right.
Now, there's nothing about being nationwide that makes it so you get more rural leads, except that most people do it wrong. So there's something to think about there, and like that's not exactly a fair association. But here's the easiest way like I've been able to distill this. There's 2 words that I really love. They're focus, diversification. These are 2 really positive words that mean completely opposite things, right? It's just 2 sides of the same coin. So there's also like different places where you can focus or diversify in your business, right? So number 1, marketing channels. You could have 1 marketing channel, very focused, maybe 2, or you could have like 17 marketing channels, right? Like that's like diversified, right? Exit strategies is number 2. You could have 1 exit strategy, or you could have all the exit strategies. And number 3 is markets that you're in. So what I'm finding is that people that are like heavy proponents of one versus the other, it's just that they have a different opinion on what you should focus on and what you should diversify on in the business. So some people will say like, you want to be focused in one market. Usually those people, they have every marketing channel and they have every exit strategy. Then meanwhile, like Robert Wensley would tell you, don't be focused on a market, be in a lot of markets, but 1 exit strategy, 1 marketing channel.
Right.
So who's more focused? Robert Wensley or the person in the single market? Like
subjective.
It's subjective because they're focused on different things, right? He probably looks at their business. He's like, they're doing all these different exits. They have all these different marketing channels. That's a complicated business. Meanwhile, that business is looking at, they're in all these different markets. How could they possibly pull that off? So what I've seen like across our clients that we've worked with is if you want to be diversified in everything, you're pretty much screwed. You're never going to be able to figure out how to do every exit strategy in every market with every marketing channel, unless you're going to like be like obviously to reach a certain level of scale, there's going to be a company that needs to do that. I'm not aware of any company that's at that level now.
I won't say multiple exit strategies, but I mean, New Western's doing pretty good.
Yeah, but they're still very focused on their marketing, right? They're mostly JV.
Yeah.
As far as I understand. And then they have probably a variety of exit strategies and a variety of markets, right? So they're starting to get in the end where they're like, okay, 2 out of the 3, now they're diversified.
Yeah.
They're still focused on 1.
Right. And they have multiple.
And they could grow more by also opening up direct to seller, but like,
yeah, and they also do, they have national hard money lending and national title services.
Okay. Yeah. And that's a whole nother thing. So anyways, I guess what I'm saying is like, all diversified, probably not a great strategy. You kind of have to choose what you want to focus on and what you want to diversify on. And usually those that are across, like a very common business model is heavy PPC, heavy like wholesaler innovation, many markets.
Yeah.
Another common business model is PPC is just like one piece of the marketing puzzle, and you've got a lot of other channels that drive a lot of volume too. And you have a lot of exit strategies because you have to monetize every lead. The reality of the situation is, if you're more constrained geographically, your leads are going to be pretty expensive in PPC. So what you have to think is, how do I become the company that monetizes those leads better than anybody else? How do I become the best at getting them under contract, the best at getting those contracts to close, and the best at making the most money per closed deal, so that my revenue per lead that I get is high? So those other people, they're like, my PPC doesn't work because I can't pay for this. Meanwhile, I make way more money per lead and I'm doing awesome all day long, right? So that's like one strategy. It's like, let's pay a lot of money for the leads and let's monetize them really, really well.
Yeah.
The other strategy is, let's pay less money for the leads. When you go more national, you could think of it like so I'll give an example. Let's just say you do MLS offers. Like that's your strategy. And you're going to do 5 MLS offers and you have to get one deal. What percentage of ARV do you have to do those offers at to get your one deal? Probably really high.
I'd say north of 80.
Yeah. If like, I got to get one deal out of these 5. Let's just say you could press a button and submit an offer on every single house in the United States, and you just needed to get one deal. What percentage of ARV could you submit those offers at?
40%.
Yeah, maybe lower. I don't know. Like really, really, really low, right?
If you could submit an offer on every single listing in the United States, maybe even 30%. Yeah.
Yeah. If you think about it, that's kind of how Google works. Like you can bid on all this traffic. So when we're doing more of a national campaign, what we're doing is we're essentially like lowballing Google, where we're just saying like, yeah, you have other people probably paying a lot of money. It's just, this is my bid limit. Like I got to be here. And Google says, I'm not going to get you that much volume. But then you add all these markets together and you can do that because you don't have to get a lot of your bids accepted.
Well, yeah, I guess the idea, the way I'm looking at it is that, okay, so maybe today, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Houston, everyone's playing, everyone's bidding, and there's not that many users searching, so no one's depleted their budgets.
Yeah.
But in the meanwhile, Jacksonville, everyone's budget's depleted except for yours, and now you're coming in cheap.
And all you need in a national campaign is one place.
Yeah.
And then you'll get a cheap lead there.
Yep.
So that's the strategy there. So I'm paying low. And then, yeah, maybe I'm like, am I as capable of monetizing a lead in that market as somebody who like lives there? Probably not. But if my lead costs a third what they would pay for it, well, now, even if I'm not the best at closing, even if I'm not the best at exiting, I could still come out on top.
Right.
So that's kind of the difference in the strategies. And then there's everything in between. Like people like to think like local, national. There's also like, how wide are you going to go around metros? Like one thing we're commonly advising our clients on is, if you're in like people like to think of it as like, oh, am I targeting Atlanta or am I not targeting Atlanta? It's not that simple. Like there's like, what does Atlanta mean? Atlanta proper, like the city limits, the Atlanta DMA? Does it
actual Atlanta city?
Which is really small compared to like the DMA.
Ignore everything else around Atlanta, just only Atlanta.
Will you be surprised how often, because we do audits as a company, where like people come to us and say, my PPC campaign doesn't work. Because by the way, if anybody's listening to this, like that BatemanCollective.com/disruptors link, that gets you to my team where we can do a consult with you on your specific campaign.
Actually review it and analyze it.
Yeah. We'll look like through the campaign. You'd be surprised how often we see something like that. Where
Really?
we're like, yeah, because here's what happens.
They don't do radius.
No, because an agency sometimes just does what the client tells them to. So the client says, I want to target Atlanta.
And they don't ask follow-up questions.
Agency goes in, types in Atlanta. That's the default. The default isn't a radius. The default is city boundaries. And you target the city of Atlanta.
Really?
And then nobody notices that something's wrong. It's very common, actually. Especially if you're working with agencies that aren't in like this industry.
Well, I guess that makes sense, because you're saying like like outside of real estate, it doesn't matter. You're a buyer. It's not location specific, but because our industry is so location specific.
Yeah, it's like, this is the kind of thing, like when I hire people on my team, they're like idiots about this until I like train them, because they're not used to doing this. Like you won't find people from other agencies that like think about this way, because this is something like real estate investment specific. It's the only industry I know of where this is like this big of a deal. So that's where generalist agencies just screw this up. They just have no idea. But the thing is, with the information that I'm supplying everybody with today, you'll be able to even potentially give that to a generalist agency and then they could figure it out.
Right.
Or like what to tell them. Because now you know not to tell them, target Atlanta. Because then they'll target Atlanta. They'll do what you told them to do. And
I guess that's fair. Yeah.
But they're not pushing back, right? That's what's important.
Okay, so Atlanta or not Atlanta?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying is like a lot of people are just like, oh, I'm targeting Atlanta. Like that, it's like, what does that mean? Does it mean Atlanta city boundaries? Does it mean a bunch of counties surrounding Atlanta? Just the main county for Atlanta? Are we doing Atlanta plus 50-mile radius or plus 20-mile radius? Or are we doing some type of custom radius targeting? Like, and all those different things produce a very, very different result. So that's where we have to be like really specific about what we want, and we have to learn how to do that strategy. Like as an example, your exit strategy greatly affects what kind of locations you're going to target.
Right.
As a business. Like let's just say I wholesale versus I do novations. Like how would that affect like what kind of properties I can deal with? It would affect it a lot theoretically. Like let's just say the property's an hour and a half out of Dallas Fort Worth. Wholesale, maybe. Novation, probably.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's more retail buyers than there are cash buyers in any given place.
Yeah. So you're saying just based on the population, you can figure out what's the best exit strategy?
Yeah, and based on the exit, I'm talking about based on the exit strategy, figure out the right marketing strategy.
Gotcha.
So it's like sort of the opposite. I mean, obviously you'll get the leads wherever you get the leads, but yeah, so there are different ways to do it. So the default is, so we'll start with single market just to make it simple. Like if you have a single market and you just know which areas are good for you, target those areas. Everybody's happy.
Right.
It's super simple, but that will screw you over sometimes. Like I'll show.
Well, there's this saturation. We were talking about on the previous module on the return on investment, diminishing returns.
So what are you saying for a single market? Like that's the issue you'll run into is that you have a diminishing return?
If you're only going to target one area, there's only so much you can spend there, and
100%.
and the profit maximizer.
Yeah. So usually what's going to happen in a single market scenario is you're going to have PPC as one of your many marketing channels, and you'll push it to the extent that you're willing to push it. And depending on how big the market is, that could be like there's people in this industry who will spend $1 million across like a few markets. It happens a month, but it's rare, and they're usually doing massive volume at an extremely high diminishing return, right? And then there's some markets where like, you're at like $5,000 and every time you push it to 7, you just can't spend more. So yeah, that totally happens. Here's an example of a time where like people go wrong really commonly with single market targeting. So I'm, for those listening that can't see, what I'm looking at right now is Riverside County, California. There's a lot of counties that have this problem on some level or another, but like this is like one of the most blatantly obvious ones.
That's one county.
This is one county. Maricopa County, by the way, another one kind of like this. Although the beauty that Maricopa has is that those places where no one wants to be, there's actually no people there. Versus this one. So what's going to happen here? And this is where like the stuff that we learned in the last episode of the series is going to come in handy. So let's just say I'm the client and I'm working with an agency and I tell them I want to target Riverside County, California. All right, this is what we got. And when I say Riverside County, think, what do I mean? Well, I really love homes in Riverside, and I probably love up to like area. Beaumont, et cetera. If we get way out to Midland, right next to the Nevada border, because this county is very, very large and it stretches all the way to the border, chances are that lead to me is a way different value than this other lead.
I mean, I'm just picturing this. I apologize. I'm interrupting you because, like, I drive to California all the time to visit family.
Yeah.
And we drive through Quartzsite and we drive through Blythe. I would never have imagined that Blythe, just across the border, is Riverside County.
Yeah. And here's what I tell you. More PPC budget is spent in Blythe than you would ever think. And most of it's wasted because most of the people targeting it are targeting it on accident because it's part of a county that also has really good areas in it. And people just do county targeting. Yeah. They're like, I just want it all. So that's just like the simple example there. So just if you think of like the auction economics that we talked about in the last episode, everybody's putting their bid in and you're winning it. like, where do you, like, the thing is, you're not going to bid differently at different places within the county, right? So if you're just submitting the same bid to Google for people that are searching in like the core of Riverside versus in Blythe, California,
You're going to win Blythe every time.
you're going to be like the hot guy at that auction. Like
You're the king of Blythe.
Yeah, you're the king of Blythe. And then you have to think to yourself, do I want to be the king of Blythe? And I probably don't, right? That's not a high quality place to be at all. So, and if it is, like, then that's a good strategy. But I guess what I'm saying people don't realize is people will target like 9 good areas and then 1 bad area from like a population standpoint. Or they'll just be like, oh yeah, that targeting is good because it at least includes like the area I want to be in.
9 out of 10 is not bad.
Yeah, 90% of it's what I want. Yeah, maybe 10% is not. The risk that you run is that you get 70% of your leads from the 10% that's bad. Based on how PPC works. Because what Google's going to do, what you're telling Google is I want to get as many leads as I possibly can in this area. And a lot of people then think that Google is evil, you know, against their mission, right? They think Google's evil because Google starts to like get them all the worst leads in those areas. But you have to realize Google's doing exactly what you just told us to do.
PPC doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. When Google's doing exactly what you just told us to do. So you're just getting the leads where you don't want them because your competitors also don't want the leads there, but your competitors are smarter than you and they're not targeting there.
They're better at targeting.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a really common issue with like even county level targeting. So we have a specific like rule that we use for location targeting. If you just get this right, and you always get this right, people ask me, they're like, is this location targeting good? I'm like, well, does it follow the 3 rules? And that's different for every company. But like, if you nail these 3 rules, it's kind of like, you know, from court, like the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. The right locations, all the right locations, nothing but the right locations. That's how you target a campaign. So there should be a few things that are true. Like you should be able to look at a map of all the areas you're targeting when you're done with your location targeting. If you could think of any areas in there where if you got a lead, you wouldn't actually find it valuable. This happens with us, with our clients all the time. Like we push them on this, push them on this, push them on this. And then like the results aren't good. And we figure out it's because we're getting a bunch of leads in bad locations. And those bad locations are the exact areas they told us to target at the beginning. We're like, well, okay, there's our problem. Like that's not target those, and that's going to fix it, right? So you should just like go through this mental exercise of like, okay, if I got a lead from there, is that good or is it bad? The answer is it's bad. Shouldn't be targeting it. The other side of that is, remember, the more locations you target, the cheaper things are going to be. It happens all the time that people include the right locations, but they don't include all the right locations. So that means like maybe I do business in LA and San Diego, but I just run the PPC ads in LA, but not in San Diego, which means I drive my cost per lead up compared to where I could be. So that's pretty common. Like one of the like worst things I hear sometimes is like, oh yeah, we're in these 2 markets as a business, but we're just going to test PPC in this market first and make sure it works, and then we'll expand it to the other market. Right. Which is like, it's like saying, I'm going to just like do this text marketing campaign real quick. And then if it works, then I'll do the direct mail. But if I can't get my text messaging to work, I'm never going to do direct mail. Like it just doesn't.
Really? It's like that.
It is like that. Yeah. Cause the PPC will work different in the different markets. And people always ask like, which one has a cheaper cost per lead? Is it A or B? When the reality is A plus B is a lower cost per lead than either A or B individually. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. It's like, maybe it makes some sense right now, but most people like, they just don't. It just doesn't click. Like they don't fully understand it.
So for those that are listening, say that again.
So if you're looking at which one's cheaper, market A or market B, the reality is market A and B together is lower cost per lead than either market A or market B.
So for example, if you had a monthly budget of $10,000, and if I said, Brandon, should I do 10,000 in San Diego or 10,000 in LA? You say do 10,000 between San Diego and LA, and you'll have an overall lower cost per lead, meaning you will have more leads, more opportunities.
100%. That's what I would say, provided you can do business well in both of those.
Right.
Now, if every single one of your contracts is going to fall out in one of those areas because you don't know what you're doing,
then don't do that.
Then don't do that, right? So that's where we have to think like revenue per lead is kind of the metric we're looking at for that. But yeah, that's why we want to try to skew a little bit wider if we can. Like the ideal is just as wide as we can without just going too wide. Yeah. But I've seen everything in the book. Like I've seen people start national campaigns I had a client got 20 contracts in their first month with not that much budget. I can't remember what it was exactly, but it was like 5 or 10 grand a month. And they did 20 contracts. And every single one of them fell through. The reason they had 20 contracts is because they didn't know how to comp properties in other states, and all of them were locked up too high.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that like makes you really excited at first, and then it looks really bad.
Yeah.
By the time it comes full circle.
We went through that.
Did you go through that?
Yeah. We went through that with Lead Zolo. We're like, well, I guess we'll target this whole state. And we had a bunch of properties that we underwrote really poorly. And it wasn't necessarily that our after repair value was off.
No, different markets, they just trade at different percentages of ARV.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we did not communicate that effectively to our front lines. Right.
Yeah. And that's,
they don't account for hold time or for contractor crew to drive an hour each way every day affects what you're willing to pay.
Yeah. Yeah. I guarantee that killed your sales team morale.
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely. Yeah.
Because I mean, nothing's worse for a salesperson than like, I'm killing it. I'm having my best month ever. And then the paycheck never comes because you can't get any of the deals closed. Like,
So that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. I can only imagine. So if we're talking about like ways to do it. So usually the way we'll do it is, let's just say you have a local market and you know which areas are good. And this is why I'm pushing on this so hard in this episode and helping people understand, because then you'll be able to communicate really clearly to us or to whatever company you work with, like, this is exactly what I want. And I understand like the strategic decision that I'm making by choosing these locations. And I'm actually putting thought into it versus just saying Atlanta and then the company targets Atlanta City, right? So usually, like, let's just say like there's a few counties and you can do anything across those counties and you just include those. Like, okay, that's fine. That works for some people in local markets. Sometimes you got to do custom radius targeting. In Google, you could do as small as a 1 mile radius. And we've done wacky stuff with that. We've done the weirdest location targeting where we include like some things, but not other things. Like if you have to stay away from certain areas.
Exclude maps.
Exclude what?
Exclusion maps.
Oh, exclusion maps. Yeah. And well, exclusions are even a separate thing. Yeah. But you can do exclusions on Google too, by city and stuff. You can't do zip codes. A lot of people want to target zip codes. Can't do zip codes.
That must have changed.
It did change. Yeah.
Well, and also like the mile radius, I don't know if that was Facebook or Google, but for fair housing, like we could no longer go as narrow, because like I used to be able to just target neighborhoods. Yeah.
So Facebook, outside of the housing, you can target small radiuses, and within housing, you can target a 15-mile radius at a minimum.
Yeah. That really screwed up when I was running my own campaigns.
Yeah. That's because, I guess, a little background for anybody interested. Apparently it's discriminatory to people in some zip codes if you choose to run an ad to them about wanting to buy their house, but not to people in other zip codes. So according to equal opportunity housing regulations, we're just...
I think it was really more targeted towards realtors. We just got wrapped into it.
You think that's what it was?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I agree with you. It wasn't, it's the whole housing category.
Yeah, because it was Federal Housing Authority, right? FHA, and Department of Justice, between the two of them. It was a major ordeal. Because we talk about like how long I've been doing this, right?
Yeah.
I used to be able to target like how many kids you had.
Yeah,
right?
Facebook has really wound that stuff down recently.
How many kids you had.
It's not that the data's not there. You just can't see it, so it feels less creepy.
Whether you're married or single, how long you lived in the property, what your credit score is. Right? I used to be able to target your credit score, your income. Right? I did all those things. And then this whole FHA thing came down. I was like, well, that completely screws up my business.
Yeah, although there's still, like, we'll talk about it we have an episode titled Lead Quality Secrets that's after this one, where we'll talk about like how the targeting is a lot more robust than we think it is. Yeah. You just have to do it different.
Well, and that was the thing, right? I just said, screw this. Like, it was kind of the same thing. Where I did all my own SEO, right, for the longest time.
Yeah.
Like, these people that are listening that don't know probably don't realize how old I am, but like I did all my own SEO for the longest time until Google algorithms changed.
Yeah.
What was once considered white hat is now considered black hat. And I got sandboxed, and you couldn't even find me in the first 20 pages of Google.
Yeah.
And if people don't even find you on the page 2. Imagine they can't find you to like the page 24.
Yeah, so, one of my sales guys always says this joke, like, where's the best place to hide a dead body?
Page 2 or page 3.
Page 2 or page 3 of Google, yeah.
Yeah. Right? It's true. And so that's the reason why I learned PPC, was because I said, forget SEO because like what's true today is not guaranteed to be true tomorrow.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I totally understand what you're saying. And it's, SEO is its own. Yeah. Like we could do a whole separate masterclass just on SEO. It's a wild world.
But that's what I'm saying. Like I was targeting by neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And then that went away.
Yeah, 100%. So you'd be surprised. Like Facebook's a little more limited. With Google though, you can get pretty narrow. Like with your radiuses. Places where that's more necessary are often going to be like some cities where there's just like hyper localized situations, like Baltimore, Detroit, Cleveland. All great examples of cities where as you get closer to the center of the city, the leads get worse, not better, which is the opposite of like Phoenix, for example, where there's a lot of like high values of properties as you get closer to the city. So yeah, you have to be kind of careful with a lot of those places. But what a lot of people find, like sometimes when they're trying to target locations, people are predicting where's the motivated seller. You have to, when you're working with Google, you just want to be looking at like assuming I got a motivated seller. Do I want them or not? Like for example, in California, a lot of people don't want to target Orange County because there's not that much motivation in Orange County. Meanwhile, we have clients killing it in Orange County because regardless of if you think people in Orange County are generally motivated, if someone in Orange County is searching for We Buy Ugly Houses, they're probably a motivated seller.
Right. You don't need a lot.
Yeah, exactly. So when we're targeting, we're not trying to think where are the motivated sellers. The only thing that should be going through our mind is if I got a lead from this area that was a motivated seller, could I monetize it well or would I not be able to?
Yeah.
If the answer is yes, I can monetize it well, put it in your targeting. If the answer is no, keep it out of your targeting. All the yeses need to be targeted. All the nos need to be not targeted. And that's how you win. So there's different ways to do it, like sometimes counties, sometimes a little more radiuses and stuff. If we're doing a national campaign, there's a specific strategy we're known for that's really effective. And I'll show for anybody on YouTube, I can show the map right now, just using Atlanta as an example. So we use something that we call satellite imagery targeting. And the way that satellite imagery targeting works is you can see this map here. In this website, if you're looking for it, it's just blue-marble.de/nightlights. There's
random, completely random.
Yeah, some like company from Denmark. I honestly, there's probably tons of them. Like you just look up like nightlight overlay for Google Maps, you know? I'm sure you could find like a Google Earth file or something. This is the one that we use, but nothing special about it. But the idea here is you can tell the difference between a metro area and not a metro area. Because like, let's just look at Atlanta, for example. Atlanta proper, what is that? It's going to be this like tiny area right around Atlanta, right? Because I just go like a little bit over here. Now I'm in Decatur, right? That's not Atlanta anymore, right? If I looked up the DMA, which is if you're not familiar, designated marketing area, the DMA goes all the way actually into Alabama, believe it or not. So what's going to happen if I target the DMA? If you told your agency, target the Atlanta metro, what's that going to mean?
Stuff in Cave Spring and Buchanan and...
Yeah, you're going to get leads in the middle of nowhere.
Bowden.
Yeah, which are really, like, if that's your strategy, if you love rural properties, we work with clients sometimes that love rural properties. If that's you, then great. I can tell you far more often than not, we're trying to figure out a way to get rid of the rural properties, not to get more of them, because it's hard to find buyers for a lot of rural stuff. So if you use this strategy, then what you can do is you can see the density of the light, and that gives you some idea of where there's like sustained population around Atlanta and where there's not. So you can kind of see like, oh, there's areas where there are kind of lights, but they're sort of far away. This is like what I would call our novation radius a lot of the time, right? Like maybe even as far as Athens here. But if we're looking really like tight around Atlanta, if we're trying to wholesale, we probably want to keep it to the like core area where most of the buyers are going to be really interested. So that's how you target the right locations, all the right locations, nothing but the right locations. And as you learn more about the markets, you choose like, do you want to target them a little bit differently? Like if Atlanta's your home market, you're not usually using this because you probably know something beyond this.
Right.
But if you are like entering into Atlanta, then this is a great way to see how do you target the area and how do you not. Because the risk with PPC is you just have that tiny like leak in your targeting and then it becomes all of your budget going there. And that's what people don't realize. They're like, oh, so what if I included just a little bit of rural area? There's not that many people out there anyways. Yeah. And you'll find it has 5% of the population that you're trying to target and it has like
80% of your leads.
80% of your leads, yeah. And people just don't understand it.
It's like, I guess the way to look at it is maybe like a hole in your boat, is that wherever the hole is in your boat, the water will find it.
100%. And it gets ugly pretty fast.
Yeah. And this nightlight that you showed here, like this is a campaign you had set up for us, was Arizona Florida, and Texas, right? So we had kind of like a quasi national strategy. So can you expand upon what you prescribed for me and my team?
Yeah. Why did we choose Arizona and Florida and Texas? Okay, there's a few reasons. So yeah, this was like you said, like kind of quasi national. And we weren't everywhere. So why did we choose to do that a little bit? Well, as you start to add a few markets, your cost per lead starts to go down a lot. And I'll actually pull up like a specific graph again for you folks on YouTube, and for everybody else, I'll try to explain the takeaway. So what we did recently, because people are always asking, like, how much is the cost per lead over here versus over there, et cetera. So we actually use the data of like a list of our clients and how many markets are they in and what is their cost per lead. And we found a model of best fit to basically model what should your cost per lead be based on the number of markets that you're in. And this is what the relationship looked like. This was the line of best fit. So you could see for a single market, typical cost per lead being about $325, ranging as high as close to 500, as low as like 170 or something like that. And then as you get to like 11 markets, now we're like 175 per lead, right? As high as 275, as low as 100. And you can go all the way to 200 markets. It gets way cheaper. But
200 markets.
But like
to 100 markets.
I said 200 markets.
200 markets.
We have a list of 200 markets, yeah.
But it also looks like it's diminishing once you get to 200 markets.
It does diminish, but at the same time, the gap between like 49 markets and 200 markets is you cut your cost per lead in half. So it's just a little bit per market, but it's a lot overall. So we have to decide like where do we want to fall on this line, because like the more markets you're in, the more complicated things get.
Right.
So there's a reason I prescribe that specific strategy to you. And I'll show like an example of how we do this. So this is our nationwide client location targeting sheet. And by the way, this is a part of the toolkit. So I'll show the sorry, I'm fumbling around the right tabs. Where was it?
Well, the third tab says thanks. Could be that one.
Yes, that's it. No. Here it is. All right, please, editor, cut that out because I showed our internal company Notion on accident and our podcast stats.
Yeah.
So I'll show here inside like the toolkit that we give. There's actually a specific link to this sheet in here. It's called under general resources, the nightlight targeting sheet. And just to show you what we did here, we have a list of all the metro areas in the United States. It's just shy of 200. And we have data here from our clients of the average expected deal spread across these different markets. We even have data from Investor Lift about how hot those markets are for their platform, their rank, their population, and some custom notes. Like Miami, for example, looks great on paper, but like people don't do well there when they're not from there because it's kind of like a foreign country, right? So we have those kinds of notes, right?
Yeah.
So this data is actually like wildly valuable. If you guys download the toolkit, you can get this and start playing around with it. The really cool thing about this spreadsheet is this spreadsheet uploads directly into Google. Like you select the right markets you want to target in the way that you want to target them. And we have instructions on what all these things mean. It's mostly stuff targeted around Google Maps and the contiguous lights that I had shown on the map. And then we you can upload I literally had someone like go through the entire United States with like a map and GPS coordinates and map out exactly where the lights are and where they're not. That's what made this sheet. So that's how we do our strategy with clients. So what we would do is we would look at this and we'd say like, well, first, what are some states that we just don't want to be in? And usually there's a few states that you just don't want to touch. Like for example, New York attorneys are the worst attorneys in the world. It's an attorney state. Probably don't want to be there. I don't want to have deals.
Not for a nationwide strategy.
No, like if you live in New York, sure.
Right.
Give it a shot. But even people in New York are like, I wish I wasn't in New York, right?
The people that are in the most difficult markets love how difficult it is because no one else joins them.
That's true. That's a fantastic point. But yeah, so nationally, you usually don't like New York, but yeah, if you could figure it out. Like I know people who do really well in New York, but they still deal with a mutual contact of ours. I know he has a 365-day cash conversion cycle because of how long it takes to get a deal done in New York, and he flips too. But anyways, he has to buy so deep because of all the taxes you pay, and it's insane. Right? So if you're national, you're probably like, okay, New York, not my place. Oklahoma, probably not my place because you got to have a license to do deals. Probably the same for Illinois. There's other attorney states that maybe you don't want to be in. Maybe Hawaii's a little far. So you make those kinds of decisions, right? And then we look at what metros are left. Then we look at what kind of spread we want, right? So we might choose like larger spread. So for you, like there's a reason like we stayed away from like the Midwest generally and stuff like that because we just don't want like those lower spread areas. There's a specific reason I recommended Arizona and Texas and Florida to you. So Arizona, because you already know it and you can do well there.
Yeah.
Texas and Florida are what I call bane for buck markets. The reason they're bane for buck markets is because you learn one state, but you get like 4 major markets as part of being in that one state. So like North Carolina, Florida, Texas are all really, really friendly to national wholesaling because you'll do a lot of deals there. I think at one point, Robert told me that like 50% of investor list deals are in Texas or Florida. They're just massive states with like a lot of markets in them, you know? Like if you're coming to Salt Lake City where I'm from, then you'll get a market, but you have to learn everything about Utah just to do the one market versus if you can go into Texas, you have massive, massive markets there. And you have a lot of them. So that's the reason that was recommended. You could bring your cost per lead lower by going into more markets, but if you want to kind of dip your toe into a national wholesaling strategy, then adding like one of those bane for buck states in addition to your home market is a good way to kind of test the waters a little bit,
right?
And see. Like one of my clients that went national, he started in California, and he got, we talked about how you don't always get leads in your exact location. Sometimes you get these stray leads. So he got a lead from, I want to say it was San Antonio, Texas, and didn't mean to get it, but he just got it. So then he was like, well, I guess I might as well try to monetize this. And after doing that, he thought, well, that was easy. It's not that different from California. So then he expanded into that market, and then he was there and he was like, well, why don't we just try other markets in Texas? How much harder could it be? So he did all of Texas. And then after that, he was like, well, if Texas is that easy, other places are probably easy too. And then he expanded to a bunch of other states. And each time the cost per lead just went down, down, down. And he was still able to do deals really effectively. So it's a good strategy.
All right. So it looks like anything else we got to make sure we talk about here?
I think talking about
budgeting for a new campaign.
Yeah. One last thing on locations before we get deep, and just one other thing for national strategy that I see people messing up with sometimes. So you know how we talked about how, like, let's just say you're targeting Riverside County in California, and Riverside's really good, and then I don't even remember the name of the small town that isn't good. Well, more people are going to be spending money here. The same thing happens on an individual market level. Like, let's just say you have Indiana, like Indianapolis, where the average wholesale spread might be like 12 grand. And you compare that to Phoenix, where it might be like 20, 25 grand, something like that. Where do you think the wholesalers have more money to spend on PPC on a per deal and per lead basis?
Phoenix.
Definitely in Phoenix, because they're making more money, right? So what that means is in Indiana, there's just the natural, like this is like economics and game theory, like where there's less demand, yet equal supply in Indiana, what's naturally going to happen is a lower equilibrium cost per lead.
Right.
So that's like what'll naturally happen. So let's just say we ran a campaign in Indiana and Phoenix. What would happen in that campaign? Where would we spend our budget? More likely than not, we'd find that most of our budget gets spent in Indiana.
Right.
It's like Indiana is, comparing to the other example, it's like Indiana's the rural area, and then Phoenix is like the good area.
Yeah.
Right. So where people go wrong sometimes, and they think like, oh, national, you just can't get good deal spreads doing that, is they end up targeting areas that have like a really high deal spread and areas that have a really low deal spread within the same campaign. So what Google's naturally going to do, like if we understand bid theory and how it works, is you're going to be bidding the same across all those areas, and you're just going to be more likely to win the bid in those rural areas or those lower spread areas. You're going to spend a lot of your budget there. So there's no such thing as a blended high spread and low spread campaign, is basically what I'm getting at. A blended high spread and low spread campaign is just a low spread campaign. You can run a high spread campaign, you can run a low spread campaign. If you try to do them at the same time, you're going to have a low spread campaign,
right?
Because you're not going to spend your money in the areas that are like most attractive,
right?
Generally. So this is another place where like people really mess up. Is let's just say I want to target high spread areas and low spread areas. There's a right way to do that and a wrong way to do that. The right way is to have a separate campaign for just the high spread areas where we tell Google, this is our priority area and we want to bid higher here. We expect to pay more per lead here and we want to dedicate this budget to these locations. And then you have the low spread campaign where you're basically telling Google, we're willing to get leads here, but they've got to be cheap. That's the only way it's going to work for us.
Yeah.
Or you just do a high spread campaign, which is pretty common, but that's like one of the most common issues I see is you target like very valuable and not as valuable. And then you just get all the not valuable.
Right.
And then you say PPC doesn't work. All I get is like leads and all these, like I'm trying to do a national campaign, but all I can get leads in is the Midwest.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically the same thing with Riverside County again.
Same deal, just on a different scale.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's most stuff in terms of location targeting and how you pull it off. It's definitely a different game if you're national versus if you're local, but the principles apply still. It's the right areas, all the right areas, none of the wrong areas.
Gotcha.
No matter what you do.
And then if I'm starting off with a new campaign, like what should my expectations be?
Yeah, that's the other question is like let's just say we choose our locations and we start a campaign. How long does this take to ramp up and what should you plan for and all that kind of stuff? I think budget's probably the biggest question that people have. And it's probably the biggest thing that turns people away from PPC because it takes a little bit more budget than other channels do. So for us, our standard advice to people is that usually you want to start a PPC campaign out somewhere between $5,000 and $20,000 a month in ad spend. We'll take as low as $2,000. That doesn't include a management fee, but $2,000 for ad spend and then a management fee on top of that. And that's usually in circumstances where like, you have to be really, really patient. And honestly, we just don't do it that often. It's kind of like, here's a good comparison for budgets. Let's just pretend I have a die, a 6-sided die. Every time you roll that die, you have to pay $1,000.
Okay.
If the die gives you a 6, then you make $7,000. Would you roll the die or would you not roll the die?
Roll the die as many times as I can.
Why?
Because expected value, right?
Yep.
So
expected value is greater than cost.
Right.
What if you only had $1,000? Would you roll the die or not? Like all you have is $1,000 to your name.
I'm a crazy person, so yes, but the most people would say no.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe a better question. Not would Steve do it, but should someone do it?
Would a reasonable person do it? Probably not.
Probably not. There's a lot of crazy people in this industry, so you're not alone.
Yeah.
You're not at all alone there. But that's kind of how it is with budget, right? Because sometimes what I say is like you need to give PPC a lot of budget, you need to give it a lot of time. What people take from that is it doesn't work unless you give it a lot of budget, a lot of time. It will work with a small budget, just the same as my expected value of every die roll is greater than my cost in that scenario that I just gave you.
Right.
But if I want a situation where more likely than not I end up on top, it's not that situation I just gave you if you only have $1,000. If you had $10,000, it's different. Like it's a lot more likely with $10,000 that you'll win that game.
Right.
So that's kind of how PPC works. So where do you draw that line? Really hard to say where you draw that line. What I could tell you is time matters a little bit more than budget. Our standard advice is that we tell people about 6 months for a new campaign. So one thing that you want to think of for budget is take whatever amount you're thinking of spending per month, multiply it by 6. If you don't have that money sitting in your bank account, ready to go for the marketing of the PPC, then I'd be a little bit nervous myself. It's kind of like if you're going to roll that die and you've only got $1,000. It's like, that's like, I'm not saying it won't work. And are the odds such that if 1,000 people did this on average, they would make more money than they lost? Yes.
Absolutely.
But is it smart? Probably not, right? I'd probably like roll smaller die where like you have to pay $100 per roll until you build up enough capital to then play with the higher stakes game. So yeah, generally like $5,000 to $15,000 or $5,000 to $20,000 a month, and then over 6 months is what you're going to want to look at. And if you look at that and you're like, oh, $10,000 a month over 6 months, $60,000, I can't commit that. That's what tells me your monthly budget's too high, and maybe you want to look at bringing the monthly budget down a little bit. You also have to be really strict with yourself about the timeline. I've noticed situations in this industry where people just like try PPC, fail, and then somebody comes along and convinces them to spend way more money than they did before. Like you should spend 20 grand a month in PPC. That's the problem. You were only spending 5 before, and that's why it didn't work. And now if you spend 20, it's going to work, and it works. And they're like, oh, it's because PPC needs more budget. When the reality is, the 20, if it was spread as 5 grand over 4 months and you actually stuck to it, it would have worked too. But you just like everybody says they're going to, and then they don't.
Right.
When it actually comes down to it.
Yeah, it's their stomach for fighting it out, sticking it out.
Yeah. Like I would take slow and steady over fast and aggressive, but I would take fast and aggressive over slow and unsteady.
Right.
Does that make sense? So
that makes
you kind of
sense.
have to decide like where you got to be. I guess know yourself, but like the best case scenario is give yourself ramp up, give yourself time, because you're going to want, like, here's the tricky thing about that scenario. You know, I said in a prior episode, like 144,000 is roughly the amount of money in this industry. This isn't PPC specific, in this industry that it takes to like prove a marketing channel works, assuming it does work.
Yeah.
That's what it would take to prove that that's a true thing.
Yeah.
So now you got to think like you make pivots in marketing channels. So like if you want time to like get data to see that it works or doesn't, and then pivot and then do it again,
you still don't have enough data.
We're just like people think we're crazy for saying you need this much budget. Meanwhile, the amount that I'm saying is like far less than statistically you should even have. That's the difficulty that we run in this industry. And that's why so many people are like, PPC works and then it doesn't work because I had a good time and then a bad time. Or so
we're
there's
still
just
subject to luck, to probability, we're not letting the math work itself out.
Yeah, because the reality is if you let the math work itself out, the numbers are scary and they're a lot more than you think. So that's where it's like we're all playing games where like none of us are usually playing a game where we have like $1,000 per roll and we've got 100 grand ready to go. Right. We still are playing those games where it's like we got like 4 grand ready to go and it's $1,000 per roll.
Yeah.
And we're hoping for the best. But you can, the more budget and more time you have, like the greater likelihood of your success for sure, as long as you make sure you're spending it right and you can track that you're headed the right direction based on leading metrics. I think that's the most important thing, because the analogy of it taking that much money is just based on lagging metrics. Right. But let's just say you're $30,000 in and you have 0 leads. Is more time going to fix your problem? Probably not.
Yeah. There's a mentor, Nick Peterson, someone I've worked with quite a bit. And one of the things he always says is there are 2 things that are undefeated: time and randomness. Right. Yeah. And if you're not going to give it the time, then in this instance, you're not letting time and randomness do its job.
Yeah, that is a totally fair statement. And this is like one of the trickiest. This is the most difficult thing about PPC. I had a conversation with a client the other day where they were like, our lead flow is slowed down, and it's a massive problem. We need to take action to fix it. And the way I came to the conversation was like, we're not going to do anything about this. That was my stance, and it was the hardest stance to take. And I just had to tell him, like, you're going to want to punch me in the face, but like, we're not going to do anything about this. Because if we're going to be reactive to this data when there's not enough sample to tell us that there's actually a problem, then we're going to screw something up that wasn't screwed up. And then we're going to actually be in trouble. Right. Whereas now we're just dealing with random variation. That's okay. And we did nothing, and then their results bounce right back. Yeah. But it's like the hardest thing is like what I tell my team is like, we're in an industry where everybody's like the kind of people where if you go in an elevator and you like we're on like first floor, like let's press the 5th floor button. Like we would run in circles in the elevator just to feel like we're doing something on the way up.
I made this comment the other day, if I was stuck in traffic, I'd rather take longer to get there and drive than to sit there on the freeway.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And it's like, it's human nature, right? I'm not blaming anybody for this.
But I'm controlling it. Even though my controlling is bad, the ultimate outcome is worse. I'm in control. That feels good.
That's so funny. Yeah. The other thing that we see, like, along that same topic with like random variation is there's like, I see this with people who self-manage their campaigns all the time. So if you're thinking about self-management, like I want you to like write what I'm about to say on your like bathroom mirror and like say this to yourself like, every day. Because like PPC, it just naturally goes like this, like up and down, up and down. So when it goes like this, do you think we change something when it's nice and high?
We shouldn't.
No, and we usually don't. Because we're like, oh, everything's fine. And then it goes like this. It goes nice and down. And then that's the moment where we say, oh no, something's wrong here. I'm going to change something. And then where do you think it goes after that? Up.
Right.
And then we take this upswing and we attribute it to what we did when we were down.
How smart we were.
Yes. And then we start learning lessons that shouldn't be learned. This, I mean, by the way, the same thing happens in business and everything. Anything like a lot of the stuff I'm talking about, this is just like this.
Yeah, we give
this is
ourselves all the
numbers.
credit for all the success.
Yeah. Or worse, like I've had it happen with my team where like clients are like, every time I reach out to you, because my lead flow is slow, it gets better. Like, are you guys just not managing things unless I reach out to you? It's like, well, no, it's like actually these last 5 times you reached out to us, we didn't do anything. And outside of like the norm, like it's not like there are things that need to be done. Like
you reviewed it, but you didn't necessarily make any changes.
Yeah. Or like tweaks, because it's normal. Like usually in most accounts we'll make changes about once a week, but they're more minor changes that aren't going to like massively swing things.
Right.
It's more like dialing, just tuning a little bit.
Yeah. I think, so maybe it'd be worthwhile for your guys' organization to just create a full presentation, a video perhaps, on game theory and time and randomness, right? Like,
yeah, maybe.
And there's other things too, like exposure. Some of the things we talk about is like, again, Nick, I was talking about, like, he is huge in crypto. And he's like, the problem with all you crypto people is that you look at Bitcoin every morning. Right. And this thing's going up and down. But if you just looked at it every month, it still went up and down all the time, but you don't get stressed about it.
Yeah, it's not good for. And the same thing's true. Like this applies to like all of business.
Stocks, this is like people that look at their stocks every morning.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, there was a study done by Fidelity Investments where they, which if you don't know, I think it's just like one of those like brokers that you put like your IRA or 401k with, where they basically wanted to study like which of our customers have the best success in the stock market. And they so they broke it down by like all the different data points you could possibly think of. Turns out the single data point that was most predictive of someone's success
how rarely they logged in,
it was that they forgot their password. That was the single most predictive of success metric available, which is crazy to think of. But yeah, we learn these things. So like, if you work with an agency, like when it goes down, you like email them, and then it goes up, and you're like, well, it's I guess every time it goes down, I got to email them, and then and then the agency's like, oh, I'll just press the like get more leads Google button, and then we'll be fine, right?
Right.
Or when people self-managing it, this is where I see like I find most people that I know that self-manage in this industry, they have like all these crazy ideas about PPC that they've like learned through their own like experiments that aren't experiments at all. There's just like before and after analyses of like just. It was down, and then I did this, and then it went up.
Yeah, it's a mistaken belief of causation versus correlation.
Yeah. The other thing that happens like along these same lines is people sometimes like try to test us against another agency, so they run both at the same time. It's happened to us like 6 or 7 times. More often than not, we actually come out on top. Sometimes we don't. In 0 circumstances has the client actually taken it to the point of statistical significance. So in all those circumstances, they set up the money, paid 2 management fees, got a little data that wasn't at all statistically significant to make a conclusion, and then gave up on the test and chose one of them. We just don't do it. Like it happens with our clients all the time. They're like, I want to test this thing. I want to test a landing page or something. And then we get into it, and we're like 2 weeks into the test, and the test needs 6 months. And they're like, okay, let's go with that one. That one's the winner. And we're like, well, if we're doing the test, we're going to do it right. Like there's no sense in just starting a bunch of tests that we never actually finish.
Requires data.
Yeah, and there's an actual discipline of numbers called statistics that tells you how much data you need.
Yeah, I think you're gonna have to create a really simple video that breaks it down.
Yeah, probably
that's digestible.
Yeah, I'll have to think about that a little bit. But I guess the topic we're talking about is budget. So here's the mistake that people make about budget. They say you need a lot of budget to get a great return on investment. That's not true, actually. So I recently did an analysis of all our clients with their monthly budget, their return on investment. There was no correlation between monthly budget and return on investment across them. What there is a huge, huge correlation between is monthly budget and consistency of the campaign. Because the more budget you have, now in a month, I'm gathering as much data as I would in a year with 1/12 my budget. Right, so it feels a lot more consistent. Is it more consistent? I don't know. It's more consistent in the same way that if I flip a coin 10 times a day, it feels like it's more consistent than if I were to flip it once a day.
Right.
Just because day to day, I'm getting a similar percentage of heads to tails.
Yeah.
It's not varying quite as much.
So I might sound completely full of it, but like the reason why I feel confident speaking on this, right, is that we had to study statistics, stochastics, and all this other stuff to get my degree in electrical engineering. right?
I mean, an engineer is a fair person to speak to this. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing too is like I tried really hard to become a professional poker player. So like expected values was the one thing you had to be good at, right?
Yes.
Emotional intelligence was valuable, but like really at the end of the day, you're just doing expected value calculations on every single hand, on every single bet.
It's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. PPC is basically like professional poker, but way lower stakes, and on average, people win.
Yeah. Well, right.
So,
yeah. It's
good.
You're the winning guy at the poker table, because the guy that's not winning at the poker table is the guy that's not good at expected values.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a super fair point. So I hope this gives some clarity to like anybody thinking about the budget. The only other thing that you want to think about is just the size of your market.
Mm-hmm.
Some markets just really can't handle that much budget. It correlates a lot with population, but some markets have like less people searching on Google for the certain amount of population because they have more adoption of the platform and run the demographic. So that's something that you kind of have to keep in mind. And if anybody talks to my team, then we can kind of help you understand what an ideal budget might be for your market. It's not a perfect science. Like it's one of those things where you just like look at all the data, you make the most informed decision you can, and then you get ready to adapt to whatever data comes in once you've made that decision. That's the best that you can do.
Yep. And if you guys are interested in getting a review, an audit, or strategy conversation, so batemancollective.com/disruptors. And if you guys, again, if you guys enjoyed that night light, I mean, it just doesn't sound like that's the right term, but the night light map.
Yeah.
batemancollective.com/toolkit-disruptors. So hopefully you guys got a lot of value here, understanding location and budget strategies. And make sure you tune into the next one. We're going to be talking about lead quality secrets. That's a very different concept. So we'll see you guys on the next one.